Big news today. We are launching Threads.
The app will be linked to Instagram and is widely seen as a potential rival to Twitter.
Twitter is threatening legal action against Meta over its new text-based social media app called Threads.
Whatever Twitter can do, Zuck can do better.
It's pretty clear that this is rushed to take advantage of the fact that people right now are looking for an alternative to Twitter.
This is far from the first time Zuckerberg has been accused of mimicking a popular social app.
Hello everyone, welcome to Legally Bound Business and Real Estate Explained. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing the ongoing feud between Twitter's Elon Musk and Meta's Mark Zuckerberg. With me here today is Mr. Joseph Rugari, the one and only.
Hey everybody.
So, in today's episode, we will start off with discussing the recent letter sent by Alex Spiro, who is the attorney at Quinn Emanuel for Elon Musk, and he sent a letter.
Yes, he did.
To Mark Zuckerberg, in which he says that, Mr. Zuckerberg, you've hired employees from Twitter who possessed valuable trade secrets that they gained while working at Twitter, okay? And you hired them, you meaning Meta, hired them and you put them to use towards developing a clone rival app called Threads, okay? And the letter goes on to state that this is a violation of Twitter's trade secrets.
Yeah.
And it's also a violation of Twitter's other intellectual property rights, which Mr. Rugari will be talking about in more detail today. Now, for those of you who are not aware, Meta, formerly Facebook, has a history of trying to clone apps and repackage them as their own. Their motto a long time ago was, why innovate when you can imitate? In 2020, there was this U.S. House Judiciary Committee probe which revealed emails from many Facebook employees where they were stating, copying is faster than innovating. In fact, you all may remember Mark Zuckerberg testifying at the House Judiciary Committee where he was asked, hey, have you ever, Mr. Zuckerberg, have you ever tried to clone a business's app while looking to buy it? Or have you ever threatened cloning their apps while you're looking to buy them as well? And he says, I don't recall, okay, conveniently. So this is Facebook. They do have a history of cloning apps, and I think that this time around they may have stirred the hornet's nest, so to speak.
Well, it's interesting. Sorry to cut in there, but what's fascinating to me about this is that, like, on the surface, when you read this letter, which I have in my hand, it's almost baffling in a way that they would go into so little detail in some respects. I mean, I've been doing a little bit of digging myself. One thing I found, there's a professor from Stanford, Mark Lemley. He's one of the foremost experts on intellectual property law in general, and one thing he noted about the letter was that based on what was written, it almost doesn't seem to show in any meaningful sense, at least I suppose to someone like Mark Zuckerberg or his counsel, that there's anything to go after. But I suppose probing that is what we're here for, really.
Right. I mean, I thought that the letter was a little vague, and maybe they kept it deliberately vague, okay, for whatever strategic reasons they may think that they have right now. So let's talk about what kind of potential intellectual property causes of action Twitter may have against Facebook if these allegations are indeed true, that Meta hired Twitter employees specifically with the goal of putting them to use on developing Threads.
Well, it's interesting because it seems like this is the sort of thing that would center around trade secret, very specifically trade secret. Just as a brief aside, it doesn't seem to implicate as much the issues regarding potential copyright or trademark-related infringement, and I think I can imagine why. So before I get into the trade secret aspect, first and foremost, one of the issues with the potential copyright claims is that, you know, while there are certain aspects of the Thread app which are very similar to Twitter, as several commentators have noted, they're not identical. And there may be enough distinction there, or otherwise, it might be the sort of thing that isn't original or unique enough where anyone really wants to go to court over that because of the nature of how these sorts of apps work. You know, the communication threads are going to be very similar from app to app to app. So insofar as, you know, copyright goes, the first argument is that whatever might be copyrightable isn't, because it's really more of a form of material than it is, strictly speaking, authorship of material.
So for our audience there, who may not know what copyright infringement is, can you break down what is copyrightable, okay, and when can it be said that someone has infringed on your copyrights? Give us an example.
Sure. Well, we'll just do it as simple as we can. You write a book. That book is your copyrighted material. The moment you put pen to paper, that's your copyrighted material. Now, funnily enough, the things that are copyrighted are going to be your individual creative work, which is to say the stuff that comes from here. The ideas themselves mean nothing without the work. It's without the work in existence, but that doesn't mean they don't come from here. But the facts themselves, if you have anything in your work that's, for example, especially in nonfiction work, anything that would be considered a fact, like a scientific theory that is commonly used throughout a discipline, that would probably not be copyrighted, even in the context of a copyrighted work. It would be a portion of the work that's considered not copyrightable, in spite of the rest of it, of course, being copyrighted. Now, copyright infringement is when somebody takes your copyrighted work, the stuff that can be copyrighted, the creative work coming out of your mind and not necessarily the facts on the page, and then they imitate it either exactly or through something called a derivative work, which is where they take your idea and they change it only a little bit so that it's different, but it's not so different that it isn't clear that it came or derived from the work you made.
So the essence is still there, but they reverse engineer it or tinker with it enough that it's not the same.
I mean, I might distinguish the term reverse engineering because that's commonly used in patent discussions, which I'm not going to really get into in detail here. Right. In fact, in patent discussions, it's used to specifically define something that isn't patent infringement. But again, there's a lot of nitty-gritty details behind that that probably aren't appropriate for this discussion.
So can software be copyrighted? Software code?
Oh, yes, code can be copyrighted. The thing to remember with copyright is it's not so much about the fact that people use algorithms or they might design certain code structures in certain ways. It's about whether they're using the exact same words that you would use or words that are otherwise derivative, which is to say they capture the essence but are not necessarily entirely the same.
Do you think that's where this lawsuit may potentially go as well, where Meta alleges?
Unlikely, and here's why. The parts of Meta, or not Meta, my apologies, the parts of Threads and the parts of Twitter that might fall under copyright would be those parts that are not being developed by their users, which is like the actual threads themselves. It would be sort of the, broadly speaking, the compilation or organization of the data into certain types. And that there's a particularly famous example of what's called a double accounting book, which is where you sort of have double entries, where a gentleman who's, oh goodness, I can't remember the name right now. All I can remember are the facts. Oh well, I suppose we could get someone to look it up. Sure. Anyway, but the point essentially boils down to the fact that the actual entries in those double accounting books, which were revolutionary at the time, there was no copyright protection for it because the nature of how it was developed was not considered what one might call creative or original for the purposes of establishing copyright. In fact, it was essentially just considered a table in which information goes.
So you're saying that that similar analogy would apply here?
Right, because if you look at the Threads app and the Twitter app, there's some obvious similarities in how sort of the threads are structured. But the problem becomes the reason it's structured that way is because that's how pretty much all thread-based communication apps, since going back as far as things like IRC or AOL chat for that matter, have been sort of structured. And so you'd have a hard time suggesting that it's on its own without some like seriously close overlap that it would be copyrighted.
I see.
And then with the trademark part, the analysis is somewhat similar too.
And break down for our audience, like, what exactly is trademarkable with a simple example. And
Sure. Simplest example, we might as well use Twitter. The Twitter bird. The Twitter bird is trademarkable. Now, the nature of trademark is that you're essentially using it to advertise whatever it is you're selling. So the very idea behind it is that it's tied to some kind of commerce, some kind of goods that you're selling or services that you're selling. In Twitter's case, they're selling essentially a platform on which you can communicate with other people through these threads, Twitter threads.
yeah,
That's an interesting thing I didn't think through. But I will now. So the Twitter bird is pretty clearly and obviously a trademark because it's a mark that's being used to advertise Twitter's goods. In this case, those goods and services are the provision of a application to disseminate information in short bursts, 128 characters or 256 characters, short bursts. And so within that subsection of things people can sell, the Twitter bird is Twitter's and Twitter's alone.
So how would a trademark infringement lawsuit here look like if Twitter were to sue Meta?
So it would be under a doctrine, probably under the doctrine of trade dress. Now, trade dress is basically its trademark, but instead of like a logo or a slogan, it's about the look and feel of something. Like the McDonald's building is so iconic that most people can even tell when a former McDonald's building is used for something else. Generally speaking, trade dress deals with that sort of consideration. Like, what is the outlay?
So, in essentially, what you're trying to say is that the argument here would focus on, look, Threads is essentially very similar in
Well, that the look and feel of Threads and Twitter is like almost identical.
Yeah.
The issue becomes, again, same as the copyright argument, if it's commonly used throughout the industry, in this case the industry being chat apps or information apps, then more likely than not it's not going to be sufficiently distinctive, which is to say it's not going to have enough unique characteristics to distinguish it from everybody else in the field to where you'd actually be able to get trademark rights over it. And the primary reason that this becomes an issue in trade dress and trademark is because the whole point of trademark is to protect your ability to stand out from the crowd. It's not to keep everyone else from doing what everybody does.
Right.
So,
Yeah, good point there.
So bringing it back then to the trade secret thing, I think that's why they specifically mention trade secret, but they're very general about the other protected intellectual property rights. Because while there might be some arguments to be made as to the trade dress issue, or even potentially in certain circumstances the copyright issue, but you'd have to do a lot more digging in order to uncover that. I'd say that it's probably the trade secret that they're focusing on, and that's also probably why it's the only thing that was singled out in the letter.
Explain to our audience what a trade secret is.
Sure. Yeah, that's easy enough. Trade secrets are secrets, first and foremost. They are essentially things that have some kind of value to the company that would essentially become valuable to the rest of the industry if everyone knew about them. One way to sort of conceptualize that is if you have a very unique process for getting customers, and that process would be usable by everybody else in your industry, it gives you some kind of economic benefit to keep it secret, even if you couldn't necessarily get a patent or copyright or trademark for it. But the thing with trade secrets is that, one, it has to be, actually have an independent economic value, which is what that's called. Two, you have to take reasonable steps to keep it secret. It's not just that it is secret, but if you don't take any steps to keep it secret, it doesn't really matter if someone else finds out.
So if you have employees and you don't get them to sign confidentiality agreements,
that's a big one.
Non-compete agreements, okay, then could it be said that you didn't take enough steps to protect your confidential information because these employees were working on that particular app?
Well, maybe. You could get around it in other ways. I mean, you could have the data locked down such that employees can't take it out on their own. You could have it be that the only machines that are available to use the information are under your control, and that those machines are like tightly monitored. But the truth is that at a basic level, not having a non-disclosure agreement, not having a confidentiality agreement, it's not going to look good in any kind of trade secret case, because the question is essentially going to be, if you gave them the information and you didn't hold them to any kind of standard, did you really care if it was public?
Yeah, that's a huge consideration in determining whether something is protectable as a trade secret.
Right. So like, if I bring somebody onto my company and I tell them all about how, I do my morning routine to, get my company's business to boom, and then they go and they tell their new boss when they leave my company about my morning routine, it's probably not going to be a trade secret, even if it is independently valuable to my company because of it's useful for me. It's not the sort of thing that
can be used
could necessarily be used in the industry, but also I didn't force them. I didn't keep them to a confidentiality or non-disclosure regarding that information. So
good. So let me ask you this then. It's been rumored that there is a soon-to-be scheduled fight, a cage fight between Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. So who do you think is going to win?
I would have to give the edge to Mark just because he has martial arts training.
He's been training. Yeah. He's been apparently he won like second place, or he won gold in like this local jiu-jitsu competition in California in Palo Alto. So yeah, I mean, we love you, Elon Musk, but
where the all legal disputes could be resolved with
in a jiu-jitsu match, right? Ladies and gentlemen, we hope that you found this discussion insightful and useful, and we hope that you will like and subscribe to our channel for more valuable insights like this. Thank you for joining us. See you in the next video.